Good morning. Just about good morning, and thank you for joining us along with the rest of the Parish Online team on that minute's silence. It's a good thing to be remembering the people who are really looking out for us during these times, so thank you for that. Okay, today we're going to be doing another online training session, and today we're going to be learning about the Ordnance Survey mapping that's in Parish Online. So we're going to be looking at the Ordnance Survey mapping that's stacked within Parish Online, and we're going to be looking at the licensing that allows you to see that mapping within Parish Online. Don't worry, we're not going to get bogged down in licensing today. It's mostly going to be pretty pictures. There might be a slight limitation on the timing for today's session on account of the Parish Online kitten cutting through the charging cable for my laptop. So if it gets cut a little bit short, you'll know why, and we'll pick it up again at another time. So if you're going to play along at home today on Parish Online, we know a lot of you do when you're looking at these sessions. A few little tips for using Parish Online. The first one is to use a mouse instead of a trackpad. You can use a trackpad on a laptop, but it's much easier to use a wired or a wireless mouse because it gives you much greater control. Try wherever you can to use a modern web browser like Chrome or Firefox or Edge. These are the most reliable for using web software. Try and avoid using some of the older ones just because they aren't as compatible with the modern technologies that we use. Make sure your browser is set to view the whole part of your screen. This means you see all the buttons and all the tools that are available to you. And also make sure that your browser zoom settings is set to 100% or lower, and that's normally up in the top right hand corner. There's an option for that. Hopefully the audio is clearer on this session. I know in the past our audio has been a bit quiet, so we've beefed up the audio to 11, and so hopefully you can all hear us today. If you can't, then you won't be able to hear this. But if we're faint, then check on the YouTube volume controls, and also on your computer volume controls as well to boost those up so you can hear us a bit clearer. Okay, so let's get straight into it. So I'm going to carry on within this slide stack for now before we get into software, because it's useful to explain what's going on in the background. So in Parish Online there are two types of mapping datasets that we get from Ordnance Survey. The first one is the background mapping, and another is map layers. And so you'll see background mapping as these teal or sort of greeny grey collections on the left hand side of your Parish Online screen. And you'll see Ordnance Survey PSGA. Until recently that was PSMA, but that's changed. It's a naming change there. You'll see Ordnance Survey Open Data. And you'll also see a stack of Ordnance Survey individual layers. So those are all green background mapping layers on there. So by default, as you can see in these screenshots here, the OS Premium Stack Standard is selected by default in your Parish Online account. And we'll come on to that when we're in Parish Online demoing it there. The other types of information that we get from Ordnance Survey are the map layers. So these are overlays that sit on top of that background mapping. And we've got addresses, we've got a water network database, we've got postcodes, and particularly in this dataset, postcode boundaries. And we've also got a terrain dataset which shows spot heights and contours. Today we're mostly going to be concentrating on the background mapping. We'll leave those map layers there for you to explore in your own time, but it's useful to understand some of the background mapping today. If you don't have a PSGA license assigned to your Parish Online account, then you will only see the Ordnance Survey open data stack along with some other historic mapping instead of all of the Ordnance Survey mapping through the PSGA. So the point on the licensing here is make sure you get a PSGA license number. You can get that free from Ordnance Survey by going to their website, and we've got links all over the Parish Online website to help you get access to that quickly. Sign up to it. It usually takes a day or so to come through, and then you can assign a license to your Parish Online account, and then you will magically get access to all those extra data sets. This is a slide that I'm going to come on to later on, so let's flip over into our mapping account. Okay, so now we're using Google Chrome today, and here's the Parish Online homepage. Hopefully you're all aware of that. Just before I start on this, if you haven't started using Parish Online yet, if you're not a subscriber or you haven't taken advantage of our trial, do go and do that. You can do that from the link on the homepage, and we are currently offering a 90-day free trial for any local council wanting to sign up and use the software. We're doing that to support a lot of the COVID-19 work that local councils are doing, supporting communities. As you may have heard from our recent podcast session with Jonathan Owen from NAUC, Jill and Graham, who are councillors and clerks from Somerset. It was great to hear about what they were doing and how they're supporting their communities. So we want to help you guys do that work as well. So we're offering our software on a longer term free trial. Okay, but let's log in. So it opens up a new tab, and my browser's pre-filled in my details, so I'm just going to log straight in. Okay, so when you log in, you're going to get two layers, and we've covered this in previous sessions, but it's worth reiterating. So we turn two things on by default when you log into Parish Online. The first one is the administrative boundaries for town and parish councils and community councils. And so you see, if I expand this collection here, I've got the parish collection that's got a tick next to it. I can click that and it switches it off. So if you don't want to see those parish boundaries, you can easily switch that on and off. And as I said earlier, the other thing we've got switched on by default, again if I expand this PSGA collection, is the OS Premium Stack Standard. And there's three different types here. There's standard, grayscale and white, and we'll come on to those later on. And again, if I click that, I can switch it off, and I'm just left with the parish boundaries, and I can click it and switch it back on again. Now, what I want to explain to you today is the concept of a stack. So we call this a Ordnance Survey stack because Ordnance Survey provide lots of different data sets so at different scales. So we've got data sets available so we can view at a countrywide level and the detail that's needed for that, and they provide information that's right down to property level. Now, if we provided the property level data when we're looking at the whole country, first of all, it would be a mess, and secondly, it would take a very long time to load. So what we do is we choose the scale that we think is appropriate for the zoom level that you're currently on. So when you log into Parish Online, you're going to get a view very similar to this, where you've got outlines of roads, and you can see urban areas and rural areas. And before I start zooming it, if you just heard my microphone drop, that was a cat jumping on the keyboard. Working from home is a very real situation at the moment. Right, is that all back? That's hopefully all back. Okay, good. So I'm going to start by zooming out, And I can do that by using the scroll wheel on my mouse, or I can use these buttons up here. And I'm going to quickly zoom very far out. And each time you see these little spinner, that tells me that it's loading the next set of data. Okay, so this is as far out as we go in Parish Online, where I can see the whole of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, and Ireland, and a bit of Europe as well. And then we go off into Here Be Dragons. But as you can see, the view here is just showing us some capitals and some country boundaries. And so this dataset here is called GB Overview. And if I start to zoom in, I'm going to do this piece by piece, because you'll be able to rewind this later on to understand what each layer is if you forget. So zooming into the next level, that's GB Overview Plus. So I have a little bit more information there of some of the major cities around the country. Zooming in again, it will probably stay on that level. Ah no, okay, it's switched into OS mini scale. So now I've got a bit more information. I've got more roads, I've got national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty. They're highlighted in green and yellow here. Okay, and as I zoom in again, I'm going to get the same. And you zoom in there. So at that point, it's now, Parish Online has decided that the parish boundaries are suitable to show. I'm going to disagree and switch them off for the time being. Okay, another step in. And now we're into the OS 1 to 250,000 scale raster. It's got a nice short title, but that gives us a lot more detail again. So you can see the trend here. As we zoom in, we're exposing a different data set to show more information. This data set's quite interesting. It's got things like golf courses, nature reserves, castles, caravan sites, churches. That's Downton Abbey there. So there's lots more information in this view. And so these views, going from the countrywide view down to here, are just to help you get your bearings. They're not really designed for any intensive work or use, but they're there to make sure you know that you're in the right area. Okay, as I zoom in again, now it flips into a very different view. So all of those previous views that we were looking at were based on images that we get from Ordnance Survey. Now this is based on vector data that we get from Ordnance Survey. So it's information that we can manipulate if we want to. So we create this view. So we're still showing the urban and rural areas, railways, and some of the detail of the urban areas. I'm going to use one of my little trick tools here and turn on my magnifying glass so I can show you what's going on. So as you can see here, we haven't exposed any property level data yet. So that's yet to come. Okay, let's zoom in a bit further. And you can see it's starting to show more place names to give you a better indication of where you are. And again, zooming in again, now you can see that it's showing not individual buildings, it's showing clusters of where buildings are. So again, it's giving you an indication of where the urban environment is. Okay, let's go in one more step. Okay, again, we're now starting to see individual buildings, and we're also starting to see property extents, so the outlines of where those properties are. Also, if you can see this, we're starting to see some contours show up as well, so giving you an idea of the terrain. Let's go in another step. Again, it's just provided a bit more clarity. And then now this is called Ordnance Survey Master Map. So this is the highest detail mapping that we have from Ordnance Survey. It's the highest detailed mapping of the country on a national scale, and Ordnance Survey keep this up to date on a 6-weekly basis, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. But I'm going to zoom in here a few more steps, and you can see it really brings in some clarity of these buildings. So now I've got building outlines, I've got a property extent, and I've got pathways and verges. Now this is we're actually zoomed in further than Ordnance Survey recommend. And the reason for that is there's certain tolerances and accuracies in the Ordnance Survey data, and if you put it under a magnifying glass, then you're actually going to see potentially some of the errors. Actually, in most cases, you don't. It's really good, but it's not as is designed. So about here, about 1 to 1000 scale is about right as a good viewing scale. And as I zoom around, you'll see it'll just update the mapping as I get there. Okay, and depending on the speed of your internet connection and where you're viewing, you'll see a slightly different speed. So if I'm viewing a larger amount of data, then it'll take a fractionally longer time to load. And it also depends on whether I'm viewing in a rural area or not. So a rural area has less detailed information and less features on the map, so it takes a lot less time to load. So if you're looking in an urban area, then it might be fractionally slower than it would be in a rural area, but most of the time you won't notice a difference. Okay, now that is the Ordnance Survey stack. Let me quickly spin out and we'll go through them just as a reminder. So this is Ordnance Survey Master Map. Again, most of the time you're not going to need to know this. We take care of it all for you, but it's useful for you to understand what's going on. So Master Map, then Vector Map Local, still Vector Map Local, Vector Map District, still Vector Map District. Okay, this is OS 1 to 250,000 scale, and then mini scale, and then the 2 GB overview sets. So the one with the cities and the one without. Okay, now I'm going to use one of the little Parish Online tools here to use my previous view to quickly step us back into where I was. Nice little trick there. Okay, so now what I want to show you is the different styles. So Ordnance Survey provide all of the mapping data, but they also provide a style guidelines for how to view the data. So this standard stack is very much the Ordnance Survey's standard guidelines for how to view the data. So you'll see this, if you see master map in other places, in other mapping systems, then you might see it looking a bit like this. But what we also do is we provide it in different styles. So we can switch on off the standard style and switch on the grayscale style. And as you see, this is exactly the same data, but it's delivered in a black and white view. Now there's lots of good reasons for this, and mostly it's around parishes who want to submit mappings, site plans or location plans for planning applications. And doing that on the standard pastel colour view isn't really very clear some of the time. So let me show you an example of this. If I go into the annotate tool and I'm going to draw an area, I'm going to make it a red outline layer, which is typically what you'd see in a site or a location plan. I'm not going to do a very good one here. And finish. You see that pops out nice and clear. So we would recommend using this grayscale view if you are going to print a map for a planning application. The other benefit of using this is it uses a lot less ink when you come to physically print it. So nice little cost saving exercise there. Okay, and well, one thing I should say on the grayscale is as you zoom out, I'm not going to do this slowly like I did before, but as you zoom out you'll get the same data, but again with a grayscale view. And in some cases we might decide to put in some elements of colour. As you can see here, we've got some greenery and we've also got blue outlines for water bodies. So you can differentiate between what a field boundary is and a water boundary is. So we don't make it completely grayscale, it's mostly grayscale. Okay, the other one I'd like to show you on first impression is going to be very underwhelming. So let me switch that grayscale one off and switch on white. Now that has actually loaded, believe it or not, but it'll only really become apparent what we've done with this layer when we switch on some aerial photography. So I'm going to go to the APGB aerial datasets collection and I'm going to switch on the aerial photography. And you can see what we've done is we've taken the Ordnance Survey mapping and inverted it from that grayscale view. So you get the benefit of the Ordnance Survey mapping, but benefit of the aerial photography rather, but also the annotation and the outlines of MasterMap. Now this is something we've been experimenting with. We might tweak it over time and we'd certainly like your feedback on it for how you've been able to use it, if at all. But we thought this is quite a nice view for enhancing the aerial photography. As you can see, we've got the road names on here and all the outlines. And you can see it lines up near pretty much perfectly. Okay, so those are the three different stacks. So standard, grayscale and white. Let's switch back to standard. Okay, so if you have a PSGA license in Parish Online, then you're going to be getting these collections. If you don't, then you'll have the Ordnance Survey Open Data collection. So these are data sets that you don't need a license for. So I'm going to switch off standard premium stack and turn on open data stack. And you'll see that you've got a much lower resolution of data. You've got a lot less detail, a lot less clarity, and only really works when you're zoomed a bit further out. So if you're doing work on verges or any kind of plotting of your assets in Parish Online, we'd certainly recommend making sure that you've got a PSGA license assigned to your Parish Online account so you can deal with the most detailed mapping. And the difference is pretty stark. Let's zoom in again. Here's MasterMap. And there's Open Data. So you can really see the benefits of using that Open Data. I won't go over the grayscale and the white here. That's pretty self-explanatory now, hopefully. But needless to say, there are different style stacks for it. One query we get quite regularly is people saying that the background mapping is too faint. So they use the standard stack, they go to print a map out, and when it physically prints out of the printer, it doesn't really show that clarity, or it's not really strong enough. So two options there. First of all, again, we could recommend using the grayscale view. But if you do want the coloured view, then by default, we set this mapping to 60% opacity. And you can change that. So when you hover over the layer, you see it comes up with this cog. If I click on there, you'll see that this is set to 60. I can just drag this to the right and you'll see it increases the intensity and the contrast of that layer. So if you are finding that the maps are a little bit too faded, then here's where you go. Click on the cog and then you can decide how faint or strong the background mapping is. And this is really nice if you want to combine this with aerial photography, just like we did with the white stack. Because this is only set at 50%, you can actually see the Ordnance Survey, you can actually see the APGB imagery in the background as well. So let's just show that. If I click on there again, and you can see I'll make it 100% or quite faded. And that's really your personal preference on how you like to use it. This is quite a nice view. You get the benefits of the aerial photography and you get the benefits of the line work in the OS mapping. Right. Now, the other thing I want to show you in Parish Online is another collection, and we have this individual collection. So let's expand that one now. And you can see there's a lot more in here. Now what this is all of the stacks we have put together, deconstructed. So all of the mapping that we use to make up these stacks, well, most of them anyway, are in here. Now you can use these if you want to override our settings for what data set you want to look at. And this happens sometimes if people want to view master map a little bit further out than we would normally recommend. And so we give you that bit of tolerance. So if I switch off the stack, I can switch on master map on its own, and there it is, just exactly the same data, and by default it's set to 100% opacity if you want to use that. And if I zoom out a bit further, I'll actually get more master map than I would have done in the stack. Now again, you're asking our servers to collect more information each time you move the map, so there will be a slight performance issue here, but in most cases it's pretty fast. And if I zoom out again, we reach a limit and it says, okay, please zoom in to see this map layer, because there's a limit for our servers. But again, exactly the same data. So if you want to find a particular data set, then use this. Same as the vector map local. We've got that at different scales. Not all the scales, mind you. Going all the way up to GB overview. Now if you click this on at this level, okay, it's going to load, but you've not really got very much information. This is why we produce the stack for you, so that you've got the most appropriate mapping at the right scale. But we do have some other data sets that we include that aren't in the stack. So this is the 50,000 scale. Let's zoom out and have a look at that one. Okay, so this is a more traditional Ordnance Survey view. So you might want to use this for some of your work. And the same with the 25,000 scale view. So again, a cartographically rendered map, more traditional looking Ordnance Survey map, and a little bit more detail. So if you're interested and you want to go and explore those, then go and have a look. But in most cases, using the 3 stacks here, the standard grayscale and white, will allow you to do the majority of your work. Okay, right, that's all I'm going to show you in the in Parish Online today. I would say that if you want to have a look at more of that, then log into Parish Online yourself and have an explore. If you've got any questions on that, you can drop those into your into the chat box now, and I'll try and pick those up later at the end of this session, or you can always email us at any time and we'll be able to respond to you there. Right, let's switch over into our slide stack. And so now that's very well showing you all the information that's in Parish Online, but I thought I'd give you a bit of background on the source of it, so where it all comes from. And I'm going to focus specifically on master map, which was that most detailed view, you know, the pastel looking view. And that data comes from a variety of sources, and the 2 main ones are from Ordnance Survey surveyors who go out in the field and take total stations and GPS equipment out with them. So if you see high-vis people with that kind of setup, they might be an Ordnance Survey surveyor. And Ordnance Survey also digitise information from aerial photography. So aerial photography is a very good way of capturing a large area of updates, and then they can compare old and new and make additions and changes where they want to. So those are the two main sources. So over the summer, Ordnance Survey and Ordnance Survey partners capture aerial photography to produce updates for this. And also you have men and women on the ground capturing that information at a detailed level. And when talking to Ordnance Survey about this, they also take a few other sources of information, and one of them is including tip-offs from local authorities. So if a local authority knows that there's going to be a big development in an area, the planning teams there will communicate with Ordnance Survey and tell the Ordnance Survey surveyor team where there's going to be new updates, because then they can prioritise that area and make sure that as soon as there are new buildings, the information is captured and it goes through the process to end up on your screen in Parish Online. So there's just a bit of background there on how that works. And the differences that you'll get when you see those updates. Here's an example of one. This is actually in Basingstoke, in the town where Parish Online is based. And you can see there's a new development here, and the white space in the middle where there's, if you see white space in the pastel version, it's usually where there's a development ongoing. And so they haven't put any detail in there because it's going to change very quickly. But you can see they've started to put outlines of buildings that are maybe just the footings for them, or the in construction. And then you can see buildings that are coloured in pastel where they've actually been built. And then you've got the outlines as well. So you've got the property extent where you see that in a yellow colour. Now, this was the data set as of last Tuesday. Now let's look at the data set as of today. And you can see a subtle change, but actually there's more information now in this view. Let me just go back and forward again. You can see that small changes have been made, and that's just in a 6-week block. So master map is updated on a national scale, and they're updating this information at that level. It's very impressive. There we go. So where you see that white space, you know there's buildings in development, and you'll also see that with the address-based properties as well. Ordnance Survey, Geoplace and local authorities are very quick at bringing that information together and providing it to partners like ourselves so that we can put it into Parish Online software for you. Okay, so let's have a look at that process. How did that information get there? So we spoke about the men and women in high vis, where they go out and do the data capture. So that's through the surveyors and through a team in the Ordnance Survey building doing updates from aerial photography. And that's a continuous process that happens every working day. They are capturing more information and feeding it into the Ordnance Survey database for master map. And so then you've got this ongoing data set that needs to be communicated and updated for all of the people in the country that use the master map data, including us. So on a set date, they take an extraction of that data, and this happens every 6 weeks. And then it goes through a processing process where it gets ready for publication. So it gets put into a format that's ready for us to use and import into our database. And so the 2nd of April dataset is then extracted, and then it's ready to be published on the 21st of April. And then it's available to partners just a few days afterwards. And then it's up to us at Parish Online to put that information that Ordnance Survey's given us into our database. And so we typically do that within 24 hours, 48 hours, depending on when we receive it. And so you can see the whole process there. So these dates are real dates taken from the last update that we did last week. So the information was captured possibly weeks and weeks before. So over a 6-week process, it might have been captured from a variety of different sources. It was put into a database. They said, right, we're going to take the data from the 2nd of April and make that available to all of our partners. They extracted that. It was ready by the 21st. It was available to download on the 23rd. We downloaded it on the 23rd, and it was in Parish Online on the 24th. So a lot of the time this is an overnight process that we can do. Okay, and that is an abrupt end to my slide stack, but that's what that's all I wanted to show you in Parish Online today. Let me take you back to my start page so it at least looks a bit prettier. Thank you for joining in for that. We'll have a look at the chat box just to see if there's anything there that I can cover right now. Wow, I wish I hadn't made that text so small. Okay. OS are usually very slow to make changes in rural areas. Yes and no. They have to prioritise. So again, if you want the official answer, you'll have to go for Ordnance Survey for this. This is my take on it, my personal take on it. They have to prioritise what's important to people. And a lot of the time, if you're doing work on neighbourhood plans, on assets in your area, then you need to know where the new stuff is. So a lot of the time they will prioritise newer areas, as we talked about earlier about the local authorities telling them where there's new developments coming up. They do also have a big programme of capturing information in rural areas, but a lot of the time some of it can get missed, or they're not aware that something's happened. There is a process where you can, as a PSGA member, tell Ordnance Survey about those changes, and they can schedule those into their update programs. They're looking at changing the way they're doing that, and we're looking at how we can also help. So if you notice anything wrong with the OS mapping, you could actually contribute to that information. So that's how it works in rural areas. When we get more detail on that, we'll certainly send you more information. But yes, it's an iterative process. Okay. Mentioned OS update in the mapping every 6 weeks. How do I inform them of changes in accuracies? Okay, so that's the same as we just spoke about before. At the moment, if you go onto the PSGA web pages, thinking off the top of my head here, there will be a contact details there either at the bottom or somewhere along that page, where you'll be able to kind of manually tell them and give them information. Try and be as descriptive as you can with that. Maybe even do a printout from Parish Online and use the annotation tool to put an arrow to say this is wrong. That might be a good way of doing it. Very especially about the white master map. Good, glad you like that. No, there isn't a magnifier. Yeah, the magnifier. Sorry, I might have confused you a bit with that. Let me switch back into my Google Chrome. So yes, this isn't a feature of Parish Online, although I kind of like the idea. Maybe if we get some quiet time over Christmas, we'll make a magnifier tool. This tool is something I've added to my Google Chrome, so you can search for that in the Chrome Web Store, or basically I did this morning. I just Googled magnifying glass for Google Chrome and it came up with an extension. If you do that, read the reviews, make sure it's got good reviews and has been updated recently. You don't want to be installing apps and extensions to Chrome that aren't very good, because that will ruin your experience. So make sure you read the reviews before you choose your magnifying glass of choice. And I think that's about it. Okay, great. Well, we'll leave it there then. Oh, hang on, we've got one more. Oh, look, it's Jill. Have you ever thought about including a layer of more detailed foreshore data for hydrographic charts? Yes, we could do that. The Hydrographic Office does have some data, and I'll have to do some research to see what's available and under what license. That's always the balance we have to take, is between the if we have to pay for data to bring it in and the usefulness that will provide for our parish council customers. But if there's data that's freely available or available under your license, then yes, we'll certainly try and add that in. What we'll do is we'll add that to the list. It would be handy to be able to move the building labels. Yes. Let's just zoom in here. So let me just explain the labels here. Let's just make that a bit stronger. So these numbers and these labels here are baked in to MasterMap. So we don't have any say on where these come up. So I wouldn't be able to manually change this information. Actually, we could, but then we would be out of sync with the official Ordnance Survey mapping, and we don't want to do that. So we only ever bring this information through. But yeah, these are baked into MasterMap. We could possibly look at adding an individual stack where there's no labels at all. If you didn't want to see any labels, we could probably do that quite easily. So I'll look into that, and hopefully one of my team will remind me, and we can see if we can add that in, if you would find that useful. So in terms of moving the building labels, that's not something we can do, I'm afraid, because as I said, they are baked in. There's a lot going on here. So this is actually based on, there's a lot of rotation settings for the font and the text, and Ordnance Survey spend a lot of time on putting this in so that it's in the right place for when you come to see it. So yeah, I think we'd come into problems if we started editing that. Okay, if there's no other questions, I've still got a little bit of battery left. I've got about one cable left in the office that hasn't been chewed. So I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time. I hope you're all able to continue doing what you're doing during these strange and interesting times. Oh, hang on, we've got one more in. Okay, sorry, yes. Moving in the graphics program. Yeah, we could look at some of the options around that. So yes, thank you for your time. Stay safe, look after each other, do some mapping, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much.